and just passed her on my way here actually. So that brings our 14 municipal positions fully staffed. We do have 3 vacancies on the municipal side. Of course, Brett's temporary secondment to our Island District headquarters. We have 1 member who is pregnant, so working reduced hours, but of course in the office. And then Brett previously spoke to you about a bit of a long-term graduated return to work. That's culminated in a retirement. And so at the end of last week, I finalized the staffing action for that. So round about 3 months, we hope to have that position filled as well. So forecasting to be down 2 until Brett's return, and that 1 maternity and paternity leave until into the following year. The provincial side remains fully staffed and fully occupied. Just a quick update on some of our work with the integrated units this last quarter. So this is Q4, January to March. Continue to have significant involvement with the mobile crisis response team. I just ran the numbers earlier today. They engaged in 8 files over the last quarter, officially on paper. However, they're such a good resource that our team is often in consultation communication with them, even just for guidance and some they're pointing us in the right direction. The mobile, the youth MIST team, 2 documented engagements with them on file, but again, they run a monthly intelligence meeting and are really good support for the youth, either sort of transitioning to or from Sooke for us to keep track of them. So great partnership still for us. Some really good work by the Greater Victoria Police Diversity Committee this last quarter, the last area chiefs meeting of all the lower area chiefs. We had the benefit of having a set of that committee come in and talk to us about some great work and some community consultation they've been doing about engagement with some of our different communities across the CRD, which I think translates well to Sooke. Some good ideas from there, some good talk of a regionalized position as well to sort of coordinate events and engagement opportunities in those underrepresented populations. So happy for their help this quarter. And the Integrated Road Safety Unit continues to have regular appearance in Sooke. I think they average about 2 times a month, so easily 6+ last quarter as well, and very effective when they do come to town. You would have hopefully received, if there's any questions about any of that, please interrupt at any time. If not, I'll move on to our quarterly stat reporting. There's a copy in the agenda. Few things that stood out to me. I'm happy to take any questions on any of it. A few things that stood out to me: the significant uptick in thefts and theft from vehicles. We publicized a little bit of that the end of last quarter. That spike was largely in January and largely attributable to 3 individuals, all of whom we identified, arrested, took before the courts, and were all 3 actually held in custody. Which made an immediate difference on those statistics. So looking forward into this quarter, I think we had 1 theft from vehicle compared to about 20 the first month of last quarter. So effective response from our team, really targeted and quick, quite frankly, in the grand scheme of enforcement. There's quite a number of mischiefs last quarter as well. I took some time and looked into that. I don't have much of an explanation for it. There was a small uptick in the Whiff and Spit area, some graffiti and damage to some signs and buildings and things like that. We did make an arrest on that, but as often as it is not the case, it is as often as it's not, we were able to exclude those particular folks from it. It was sort of wrong case, wrong people, wrong place, wrong time. But lots of switched on citizens down there did help us make what appeared to be a pretty good arrest at the beginning of it. Unfortunately, it wasn't our folks, and I'm not sure we ever did identify who was responsible for that rash of mischief, but it has stopped in our opinion. The other mischiefs were not notable. No real explanation for what they are as far as concentration or type, just very random in the last quarter. I think I promised Councillor St-Pierre last time I was here that mental health calls were trending down. I was right, but only by a small margin. I did look at mental health apprehensions, which really are the more serious case and really what the police are here to engage. So of what you see there, only 8 resulted in an apprehension within the district of Sooke. And those are sort of the most important cases we engage in. If they don't result in apprehensions, typically it's referrals to friends, family, community services. We do try not to just leave people, certainly, but apprehensions in the most serious cases. There was 8 of those, which are time consuming, but also obviously important and valuable. Any questions? Maybe I'll pause right now. Any questions about the quarterly stat reportings?
Go ahead, Councillor St-Pierre.
Just something very quick. It's just definition, through your worship. What constitutes mischief? Is just straight up graffiti, or are there other things that would fall into that category?
Mischief's a bit of a catch-all. See, I'm using Brett's language from last time. It can be any sort of damage to property, which is largely what's reflected in these quarterly reports, or this quarter's report. Any interference with the use or enjoyment of property. Those are sort of your 2 main categories that you see reflected in those numbers.
Question on that, would that be like trespassing or?
Typically, you could score a certain scenario. When I say score, like account for it by a trespass or a mischief. It could be. There is a scoring for trespass specifically, though.
Just asking, there was someone on our property, came through the back gate. It was a little bit creepy. Dog went out, so the person left, and I wasn't able to grab much of a description. It's just a little bit unsettling when someone is uninvited in your backyard.
Absolutely.
So it's just, I didn't get enough. I know it was a man. Black hoodie, like good luck, it's just, and then it just sort of creeped me out for a while, but there are, it's not the first time, so.
We do have a few calls like that. We would probably score that as like a suspicious circumstance for the point of tracking, which ultimately, of course, if there's a pattern in a particular area, allows us to target that a little more specifically in proactive patrols or video canvassing, stuff like that. So probably a situation like that wouldn't be reflected as a mischief.
Is that your hand, Councillor Lajeunesse? No? Okay, carry on.
Thank you. And the last thing I had prepared was just, I thank Council for their time last month and just talking about some priorities as we plan our performance for the next year. I hope to finalize our performance plan next week, but just for Council's information, what it looks like for your purposes, largely unchanged from last year. Enhanced road safety will be a priority for detachment. With a specific note that will include speeding. I think Councillor Bateman had that comment. We'll include speeding in our aggressive driving initiatives and certainly able to focus out on particular areas which change from time to time, although there are some staples within the district. A continued focus on crime reduction, reducing repetitive chronic crime and property crime through a variety of measures, including targeted enforcement, much like you would have seen in January, reducing the theft from vehicles. And then a continued commitment to communication and engagement with our communities and our community partners and our policing partners as well. Internally, there continues to be a focus on member wellness, the wellness of our team and beyond, and a new priority this year across the division of reconciliation with our Indigenous communities and partners as well as Indigenous folk in our non-Indigenous communities. So that will quite likely be what forms our performance plan for the following year, and I'll disseminate that once it's finalized to Council. I think that was all I had for you.
Councillor Bateman.
But just while you're here, this opportunity with the integrated road safety unit, you say they come twice a month on average. And I know there's, do they focus on one particular issue per visit? Is it, I know there's seat belts, distracted driving, speeding. Are all 3 dealt with during a visit, or how does that work?
I can answer part of that question. Part of that question is there's often consultation between us about to direct them towards any community issues or any particular areas of interest. They're quite often found on Grant Road as an example, because we do get a high degree or high volume of speeding complaints there. There are campaigns that are across the province or across the island that are focused on. So a particular day may be distracted driving as an example. But I think for the most part, in answer to your question, it is general enforcement. Sometimes I see them enforcing the no left turn near Casinos, and on another day they're doing seatbelts on Sooke Road, sort of by the traffic circle.
And revenue from those tickets, is that shared with the municipality to some degree?
It's a really good question that I do not know the answer to, but I will find out for you.
Anything else from members of council? All right, well, on behalf of all of us, we thank you for taking the time to be here. Please extend our appreciation to all of the members of the detachment. We very much appreciate all the work that we're doing ongoing and into the future for sure, and keep up the good work.
Thank you, Worship.
Thank you. And of course, you're welcome to stay with us for the duration of the meeting. Yeah, but you may have some other things to attend to, so we understand. Okay, next up is item 7, report of the Chief Administrative Officer, Mr. McInnes.
Thank you, Worship. I do have one quick update for council today. I do want to update you on our building permit issue and new applications coming in. So as you'll see on the screen, we've got a broken down into weekly numbers since we started counting the last week of February. Up until April 22nd, we've issued 84 permits. We've got 24 new permits coming in that same time frame. And currently we have 19 applications in the queue, 8 are on hold. So we're waiting for additional information, and 11 are making their way through the process. So again, all numbers are going in the right direction. As you can see, our permits coming in are pretty lean right now. There is some seasonality to this, so we'll see some ups and downs in the number of permits, but the application process itself seems to be working quite well right now. So again, thank you for injecting a little bit of additional resources into this, and I'd like to thank our building safety folks as well for their efforts they put into this, making sure it was priorities.
Thank you, Mr. McInnes. Any questions from members of council? Great. Anything else to report on, Mr. McInnes?
That's it, Your Worship.
Okay, well, I have something to report on. So I received this letter from CAMA, which is the Canadian Association of Municipal Administrators. And this is in regards to the Long Service Recognition Awards program. So I'm just going to read it out. The Canadian Association of Municipal Administrators Long Service Recognition Awards recognizes and celebrates the dedication to public service and municipal management of our members, which is a significant priority for our association. These awards are based on the number of years of full-time paid employment in municipal government in a management capacity as a CAO or reporting directly to a CAO, and they're granted at 10 years and given in 5-year increments. So this year in our municipality, they acknowledge the commitment of our CAO, Norm McInnes, for his 20 years of municipal service in a management capacity, and his recognition pin has been mailed to him directly. So they've asked us to assist in recognizing Norm by making a special presentation. So, sorry, this is as good as it gets. I know, it's lame. Give me a break. So we just want to thank you for your ongoing support of the municipal profession and for the part that you continue to play in helping to make CAMA the leading organization in fostering and sustaining municipal excellence. They conclude our sincere gratitude to you for your continued support of this valued CAMA member and dedicated employee of our organization. We trust that your municipality has tremendously benefited from his membership in CAMA. We're confident it'll continue to do so. And that's signed off from Mr. Jack Benzawan, the CAMA president. So we just wanted to take a moment to thank you.
Thank you.
And we are indeed very grateful and do feel that you've brought excellence and professionalism to our organization, of which we greatly value. So thank you so much for all the work that you've done. And sorry, it's kind of just me reading the letter, but. Okay. So next up is item 8, and this is our public question and comment period. So this item here is reserved for members of the public to speak on any item that is here before us tonight, with the exception of the bylaws, right? We have one bylaw, property tax rate bylaw. But it doesn't have a public hearing, so.
Sorry, I think it would be okay. I can't recall off the top of my head if it has public input at third.
Okay, because this is, yeah, so I just wanted to make that clear for members of the public. So for any item on tonight's agenda, and then we have 10 minutes set aside always at the start for 2-minute intervals for any member that wishes to speak. So you could all speak like 3 times. Because there's 3 people, but we'll leave it at that. And if you could please just introduce yourself and give us the municipality of your address. We don't need your address, and just let us know which item you wish to speak about so we can get to that part in our agenda.
Great, thank you. Dave Saunders, I live in Machosen, property owner at 1683 Whiffenspit Road, representing myself and my family. I'm speaking to the tree bylaw, or the proposed tree bylaw that's coming into effect. I do have a permit from Esquimalt today, if you're interested in seeing it, and I can hand it out through staff, or, okay. So your worship and staff and council members, I'll try to make it brief. So you had tried to put in a tree bylaw through a survey, and it didn't go real well, in my opinion. It divided a lot of people in our community. You guys made a decision to bring it back at a certain point in time. And now that time is here to discuss how you proceed even further. But what I want to address is the survey in the beginning is that I spent a lot of time writing an email in explaining where my position is and my credentials, but I'd just like to further expand on my credentials. So, you know, I've been in the tree care business for 30 years. I'm a WC qualified climbing arborist. I'm 55 years old. I still climb trees today. I still fall trees. I still save trees. I do excavating, operating. I am formerly a certified falling and bucking trainer and a chainsaw safety trainer through WCB. I'm a member of the International Society of Arboriculture, Pacific Northwest chapter as well. I am a certified hazard tree assessor through UBCN and WCB and the province, both with respect to forestry and park setting. I hold a certification with Arboriculture Canada as a hazard faller, and both with respect to chainsaw safety. I currently teach chainsaw safety and falling and whatnot. I'm working currently on a pilot project with Mosen College and the School District 62 with respect to urban forestry and training arborists. And that's becoming quite successful. And I do want to thank Councillor Lajeunesse and Councillor McMath for their input. And you did put me onto some logs that will be used in our next display. So that's pretty cool. So to tree bylaws, and I encourage council and mayor maybe to reach out to me, and I can walk you through the steps. I can't walk you through all the steps right now, and I'm coming up to one beyond my 2 minutes. Sorry, can I take another 2 minutes?
Yeah, that's fine. Just go ahead for
Is that all
another
right?
2. Yeah.
Okay, so today, ironically, I took down a tree in Esquimalt, and it was with a permit. And basically, for me, it hits the crutch of the issue is everybody think tree bylaws save trees. In my opinion, dealing with it in 30 years, and since they were incorporated into Saanich over 25 years ago, they do not save trees. They actually produce costs to landowners, costs to the municipality, and costs to developers. And today is a perfect example of that. And Councillor Loggins, I can't thank you enough for reaching out as quickly as you did. That was amazing. And that you knew the tree that I was working on, which was pretty cool. So I've done 2 oak trees this year, and one was in Saanich, strictest tree bylaw. One was in Esquimalt, strictest tree bylaw. They were significant trees. The one in Saanich was actually double the size. The reason those trees came down was because of development. It wasn't because of an arborist report or anything like that. They were existing zoning. The councils made a decision that there was going to be development, and that development couldn't stop those trees from coming down. So that tree today, Councillor Logan, is the fact that it was within a service area, regardless of it being healthy or not, it was coming down. Ironically enough, had that been your tree on your property in Esquimalt and you had to take it down or wanted it down, you would have been entitled to an arborist report of $400 to $1,000. And I say that because Dairy oaks are systemic to root rot and canopy degradation to sudden limb drop. And in fact, this tree had that, and you went up 20 feet and the limbs were rotten all the way through, as the pictures demonstrated. But more, I was shocked that when I bucked it in half by the split stem or the codominant stem, it just fell apart. So that's what oak trees do. In Sooke, there's many significant trees, and Sooke was actually clear cut at the turn of the century. And the significant trees that were left were basically seed trees that were culls that the loggers left. And our property at Whiffen Spit is an example of that. So the point of the issue is that if you're going to bring in a tree bylaw, you have to look at the costs. Staff has to look at the cost properly, because the tax increase to the residential property owner is significant. I estimate in Sooke, to do it properly, you're looking at least a 3% tax increase municipal wise, and then at least a 6% if you get an arborist report to the individual homeowners. I will be working with a certified accountant to verify those figures for you guys and myself a little bit further, because I'm not exactly sure on how many $1,000 it makes to 1%. I think it's probably about 78,000 in the district of Sooke. I do know what it was in Colwood. I had 20 people come to up to me today while we were taking the tree down, and some were really good, some were erratic, like they were mad at me. One kid was throwing pine cones at me from the schoolyard. And anyways, the bylaw didn't stop this tree from coming down. What it did start was replanting, but that replanting was costly. To replant that tree, it's probably, or the trees, and you'll see it in the bylaw, it's $900, I believe. But at the end of the day, those 20 people thought that their bylaw saved that tree because it was a significant tree. It didn't save that tree. And it added costs. And what I just say to you sincerely is that it divides communities. I've seen tree bylaws divide communities because of a whole bunch of circumstances. And I'm happy to spend the time with staff or anybody and walk you through an appraisal, walk you through my experience. I'm not running for mayor. I'm not running for council. Your job is crazy tough. I sat in your seats. I sat in committees. I know what your job is, and it's a tough job. And I respect every person here. So whatever you do, you have to look at the cost and you have to look at the impact, because at the end of the day, for people to say we've saved the trees by a tree bylaw, I'm sorry. In my experience, you haven't. So that's all I have to say. And I'm happy to take any questions now, or if you want to email me. And again, thank you, Councillor Logan. Am I butchering your name? Okay, great. Thank you. Sometimes I do. So I apologize. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Saunders. We appreciate your insight you shared today.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Do we have other members of the public here to speak tonight? This is the only time on the agenda. You're good? Okay, thank you. Thank you for attending. Okay. All right, so we'll move on, please. Item 9, and this is our consent agenda. So items 9.1 and 9.2 would both be adopted by general consent. So we'll look for a mover of the consent agenda. Moved by Councillor Logan, seconded by Councillor Bateman. Questions? Councillor St-Pierre? Now's your time, and turn on your microphone.
I'd just like to comment on the 25 plus letters we had with regards to the setback. Just to confirm that the setback has in fact been moved back to 15 meters in the new draft. I'd also like to comment on the fact that this was not a decision that was made lightly. We know that the process of drafting the OCP had a 30-meter setback and that there were environmental concerns. We just feel that given the impact on property owners, especially in terms of insurance and potentially not being able to rebuild on a legal non-conforming, that this was the right move. We had some concerns from a lot of people in the audience previously that those letters had not made the way to the record. They have. Here they are. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor St-Pierre. Any other questions from members of comments? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor, please. And that's unanimous. Thank you. Moving on to item 10, reports. The first one up is 10.1, council remuneration. Ms. Ray.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick side note of traffic fine revenue. Yes, we do get it. We budget $85,000 a year for it. 2020, we collected 95,000. In 2019, it was 77,000. So I'll know 2021's numbers shortly. But getting right into it, the council remuneration report. So council directed staff late in 2020 to bring forward suggestions for future mayor and councillor remuneration increases. And you know, I would say that a proper review probably hadn't been done in quite a while for council and mayor remuneration, as was highlighted in when the remuneration was first looked at early on in the term here. So staff used, you know, two important data sets to analyze this information and come up with the recommendations included. The first was the UBCM Best Practice Guide. It was created in September 2019, so it's recent. It surveyed multiple, you know, over 100 municipalities, and based on that, provided recommendations for best practice for council. So that definitely set the tone for any recommendations that have been presented to mayor and council for your consideration today. And the other data set, as far as you know, the number crunching piece would be the Colwood report that they just are undertaking a review of the remuneration, and the timing just worked out perfect from when we were finalizing our report. So we participated in that report, and as participants of the report, we get a copy of their information. So those were two key data sets that we used in order to provide the recommendations you see in front of you today. So the best practice guide has different categories that they go through. I'll just kind of briefly touch on the few categories here and then open it up for any questions you may have. So the first category is who should conduct the reviews. 3 options: independent task force, experienced consultant, or local government staff. Based on the reviews of this, pros and conning it, and the data set available to us, staff have feel that we had the same information a committee or a task force would have to provide the recommendations seen in front of you today. So that's why staff feel like we have the correct data, and I don't believe that an independent task force or spending money on an experienced consultant would have brought anything dramatically different to recommendations forward to council. But obviously that would be council's up for council consideration if you would like us to go with option 1 or 2 for either this or future remuneration reviews. The next piece that we look at is the frequency of reviews. So there's recommendations on the timing for reviews. It's recommended to do a review every once per term. So because of the completeness of this review, staff would recommend that this would be considered the once per term review that has been undertaken for council remuneration. And once those reviews are completed, it's a matter of, another factor is the annual adjustments that would happen outside of the annual review or the once per term review process. So those are usually covered in annual adjustments. And so as recommended in best practice guide, in which numerous, almost the majority of municipalities use the consumer price index as the indicator for determining future annual increases to council remuneration outside of a fulsome review like this was as well. Those are 2 separate processes. So staff are recommending because council remuneration, just backing up for 1 second, council remuneration is guided by the bylaw, the council remuneration bylaw. So staff are recommending including a clause in there to say future increases will be based on the December CPI, and that's consistent with multiple municipalities of how they determine future remuneration. So we're not back in front of council every year talking about this again. It will be in the bylaw and just become part of the current practice of how remuneration is determined. The next recommendation would be any implementation of changes. And so staff are recommending 2 changes to council remuneration at this time. There would be the annual adjustment, which, as I said, would just be to base future remuneration on the annual CPI, which for effective for 2022 would be 2.5%. That would be the December 31st Victoria CPI. And for council, what is up for discussion today would be the review has indicated there could be the case made for a lift in the base remuneration, which is the annual remuneration outside of CPI that council receives every year. So as attached in the Excel files and the Colwood report, et cetera, included in there, based on that review, there is a recommendation to increase the mayor and council remuneration annually for the mayor up to $47,432 annually. And for councillors from $15,750 up to $20,062. The recommendation is made to fund council at the 75th percentile because Sooke, as everyone knows, and media is highlighting, Sooke is one of the fastest growing municipalities in BC. One of the fastest, definitely in Canada as well. So our needs are a lot different than some other municipalities that maybe are stabilized and don't have the same demands on mayor and council that other municipalities have. So that's why staff has recommended the 75th percentile in order to make Sooke competitive, to encourage people to run for council, and just as an acknowledgement of the volume of work that is involved, as highlighted by a speaker earlier, with being on mayor and council, and the fact that Sooke is a growing municipality only further highlights it is important to adequately compensate mayor and council to ensure that they're compensated for all of the work that's involved with it being a growing municipality. So I won't get into all the details. There's an Excel file attached with all the details and all the math of how those numbers came up. But basically, Sooke has we use the 6 comparable municipalities based on population and annual taxes and budgets collected. And so when doing the comparison between Central Saanich, Colwood, Esquimalt, North Saanich, Sydney, and View Royal, the 75th percentile would raise council remuneration to the mayor and council remuneration to the rates I stated earlier. And so that would be the base remuneration. And then the next recommendation then would be as far as the timing of when to change the base remuneration. And best practice recommends to change the base remuneration for the new council term. So which is why option 1 is being presented to council for consideration. That would provide council the 2.5% CPI increase off the current base salary, base remuneration for council, and then have the 75th percentile be implemented starting November of 2022, and then going forward for after the current municipal election that will be occurring in October. The other piece I'll just briefly touch on would be benefits. We looked at the benefits, and as stated in the report, the district offers mayor and council the opportunity to participate in our extended benefit health and dental plan if the premiums are paid by mayor and council individually. At this time, staff weren't recommending a change to that, just to the complexities of that, but it's open for discussion. It could be some municipalities offer it, some don't, with premiums paid by the mayor and councillor. So at this time, staff wasn't recommending a change to that practice. But as far as the increase to the base remuneration and setting future remuneration based on CPI are 2 of the core recommendations that staff would be recommending council include in an amended council enumeration bylaw. Maybe I will just leave that there for now and open it up if you have any questions.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Loggins?
Thank you for the report. It all makes sense to me, having listened to staff present, but can we figure out exactly what option 1 is? Because there's option 1, 2, and 3, and staff recommendation 1 is option 3, and then there's staff recommendation 3 and 4, and 5 and 6 and 7.
Yeah.
So I'm really confused about what option 1 actually is, since it's in the motion.
Okay, thank you.
For sure. Yes, so option 1, apologies for that, for the confusion on there. Option 1 is summarized on the Excel, page 56 of the agenda package. So the option would be, and really it would be the, as far as for the current year cost of that, it would be the bottom section of that box in option 1. So that would be from council's current remuneration of 31,500 and 15,750 for mayor and councillor. It would be increasing based on the December CPI of 2.5%. So that would lift the remuneration to the 32,000 and 16,000. And that amount would be prorated and paid out to council for the period between January and October. And if council supported the increase to the 75th percentile, then the remuneration would change to the $47,000 and $20,000 prorated for the remainder of the year. So that would be option 1. And then this couple of sub pieces to that, I guess, that aren't the dollar value, would be adding to the bylaw officially to base future increases based on CPI. Would be, and to do a review once per term. So just adding that text language to the bylaw just to formalize that and ensure the bylaw kind of provides the proper guidance going forward, if that makes sense.
Yes, thank you. So perhaps when we discuss what our motion should be, we can add in those pieces and do it all at the same time. If we go with option 1 plus any of the additional options that we want to move. Is everyone following?
Okay, so how about we get questions and then we'll come back for a motion. Is there any other questions? No? Okay, so we'll put a motion forward. I know that this is awkward, but it's just the reality of it. There's been many times where organizations have said, the province needs to do this. It's gone to the province and they've said, no, we're not setting your remuneration. You can do it yourself. So thank you for asking us, but we're not going to do it for you. And that's where the UBCM best practice guide has evolved from. So despite it's just the reality of it. It's the work that we have to, it's all just part of business here. So the first part then would be that council received this report for information. So that's always easy. The second one would be that council direct staff to implement option 1 and provide an amendment. Oh, I see. Amended council remuneration bylaw for and provide an amended council remuneration bylaw for consideration at the May 9, 2022 council meeting. So then for just touching on what Councillor Logan's raised, just scrolling. Let's just hear a comment about my iPad. I know, and I just closed it. Scrolling. It doesn't, anyway. It just
Your
quite doesn't
worship,
jump to the page.
can I just clarify one thing?
Yes.
So option 1 is all the staff recommendations, just to clarify the conversation on that. Sorry for not being clear on that. So anything that says staff recommendation 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, if those are all endorsed by council as is, then as far as staff are concerned, those are all considered option 1. And if any resolution to do option 1 would include all of those recommendations being implemented as they're needed, if that clarifies that a little better.
Yeah, the main piece is that the change really kicks in post-election. It impacts the next council.
Correct, other than
Yes.
the CPI piece for January to October, but the larger base remuneration bump would be effective November.
Yeah.
For option 1.
Yeah, that is what I just read out and is on the floor. So no, I just read it out. So I'm looking now, is someone prepared to move it? Councillor McMath has moved it, seconded by Councillor Logan. So, okay, Councillor McMath, go ahead.
I have mixed feelings about it. I love the idea of setting it to CPI, so then it takes the personal and political component out of it. It just becomes a formula, so then it doesn't become a platform. Because what happened previously is it was sat on for a decade, and then this group had the uncomfortable task, especially in the midst of a pandemic, to set it right. And so 10 years of stalemate makes for like a very obvious impact, and the wonderful headline of a 50% pay rate, like 50% of not a lot is still not a lot. I do love the idea of having it follow the CPI, because I also want, regardless of what happens at an election, I still want a spectrum of the community to be able to participate in this job. And it wasn't feasible previously. I'm not comfortable with changing the base at this time, but I'm happy to set the CPI formula. This would be the third time that this council has the uncomfortable job of giving itself a pay raise, and I feel like it's not quite the time. Setting the formula and setting the standard and creating the bylaw is perfect, but for the base, I'm not comfortable moving that right now.
Okay, Councillor Logans.
The base rate increase would not take effect this term. It would take effect for the next council. So I'm happy to do that for the next council, which is why I support option 1.
Yeah, so it really is effective the next term. So really what we're doing is saving the next council. They don't have to do this. We're doing it for them. And which is why the council that served from 05 to 08 did it for the incoming council in 2008. And then it went silent until this council did it, basically. And actually it came from the public of all places. Councillor St-Pierre.
I agree with option 1 and I'll support this. I'd like to point out that one of the reasons we sent this to staff was to take the politics out of it. And as such, I don't really want to pick it apart very much. I'd rather say, okay, council wanted to step aside and let staff come forward with recommendation based on best practices, based on what was being paid elsewhere, based on what was appropriate in order to encourage people to run for council and have more diversity. I think they've done that. I'd rather not pick it apart myself, so I'm just putting that out there. We did put it forward to them to come forward with this work. And ideally, as Councillor Logan has pointed out, any large bump is not ours. That's for next council. And it just brings things up to par. It's still not, basically we're still below par. And it's just bringing into alignment with other districts with similar workloads. And that's all there is to it. So I'd like to trust the work of staff on this.
Councillor Beddows.
Yeah, I want to thank staff. We've always said we want to establish a baseline. That is the baseline. That's what we're looking for. So I'm pleased with that. I hear numerous times in the community is that we're all underpaid at council, and I think that recognizes it. So I'm happy to support that option.
If I'm not mistaken, just so I can ask a question here, these are also, with the exception of Colwood that's going through a review now, the others are based on the Sophie reports from 2019 and 2020. Is that right?
No, through
Okay.
Your Worship. Colwood just recently conducted a survey and got updated information from all the municipalities. So the only one I used Sophie for, staff used Sophie for, was Central Saanich, as they didn't participate in Colwood survey. So Sophie's was used for Central Saanich, but the remaining municipalities had recently participated. So those were the baseline numbers used, which would represent 2021's current remuneration.
And then in terms of Colwood's numbers and the work that they're doing, where did they get their numbers from? Like they reached out to, because I know other municipalities are currently they're going through this exact same process. And I don't know if their reports are out yet or not. So they were able to obtain what is coming to those councils?
Correct. I guess Colwood just sent out, Ms. Mushada actually got the request from Colwood directly. I didn't speak with him directly, but my understanding is Colwood elected to form a task force, I believe. And so staff were just undertaking a survey in order to give the task force some information to start with, and polled, had various questions they asked all municipalities to respond to. So this is just based on the responses received from staff at these municipalities. If that
Okay.
answers your question.
It does, because where I'm going with that is where some of them are also going through this and may not have their data yet available. One could argue that it's still going to be lower because some are going to look to come in, like they're looking at their 2020 numbers, and some are doing what they're 2022 and bringing it up. So we're going 75 percentile for some that are a bit older and not necessarily new. So it will put, if you're following my logic here, Sooke will be still at the bottom end in 4 years from now, because some of the data they're using is based on 2020, 2021. It's not their current 2022 numbers yet because it hasn't come out yet. Yes, so I'm just saying it's still not, it'll be interesting in 4 years where that actually falls again. But that's fine.
Correct.
It's the information that's available, and given that the councils haven't passed that, it's still subject to change. So it is the best effort that any staff member or consulting group or task force can make, because they don't know the outcome of those decisions, and some won't be made for some time. So, yeah, okay. Councillor Bateman, then Lajeunesse.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm in favor of option one here, and I find it's an interesting evolution here in how this remuneration process has happened, because when you look back at Mayor Evans's era, there was a task force at that time, I believe, that established those guidelines, including the CPI annual increase. And of course, Mayor Milne stopped that and his council in 2011. And as Councillor Maja says, nothing has changed. The previous council left us with this task, and it was awkward, of course, that headline in the Mirror, 50% pay raise. And the difference between then and now is we do have this UBCM best practice guide, and staff have delivered, as Councillor Beddows says, a good baseline here for future councils. Personally, I'm not in this for the money. It's clearly it was always going to be a below minimum wage job. And yet I'm 65 with the house paid off. And there's a lot of my type in municipal governance, right? You sent out that diversity piece the other day, and I fit in that pot. Fortunate, privileged me. However, to attract a diversity of representation around this table, we need to up these rates, right? So, and given it'll be for this next council, it'll be perhaps an encouragement for people to step out of the weeds and run for office, particularly for mayor. Look at that, big increase there. He says joking, but going sideways with his joke, and councillors too. So 20,000. Okay, that's it from me.
Councillor Lajeunesse.
Yeah, I guess I'm willing to support it as well. I would be less inclined to support it if it were going to be retroactive or taking effective immediately. But since it's for the next council, I think it's the right thing to do. And I'm happy with the way things are with the benefits, where we are looking after that for ourselves. I don't think we want to dump more work onto staff to maintain everyone's benefits. And so that's it.
Councillor St-Pierre.
I'm, as I said, in support, and I'm more than willing to take it as is, as I said. But I would suggest that the benefits are probably one of the best ways to actually encourage, for example, people that are already, trying to pay a mortgage and so on and so forth, that may not have benefits, especially people that are self-employed, to potentially run for council. Benefits are huge; they're a big deal, and if we can increase the baseline a certain amount, but the benefits could actually take someone who wasn't going to run and say, "I'm going to run because I want my kid to have braces." So just pointing out that the benefits could be something for a future council to consider. At this point, I don't want to mess with anything we got here.
I think there's no real one size fits all. So, having like with the UBCM practice, I mean, there's 189 local governments in BC, over 100 replied to that, and it's different everywhere you go. And it varies. Some cover it, some don't, some do, it's just the way it is. In other cases, sometimes counselors, for example, receive a base salary, but as they sign up for additional appointments, then there's a lift added to those additional appointments. That can be easy or difficult for staff to track. And then it's also knowing some of the external appointments that, our group here is assigned to may also provide a remuneration, right? So some do and some don't. So then it's knowing which ones do and which ones don't. And so that there's no double dipping per se. So I think that's where we have our travel expense policy to cover off the mileage in terms of what isn't picked up elsewhere. I'll share, like at the CRD, for example, they probably have a whole fleet of staff tracking it because there's 24 directors. And then there's the base pay. And then the more committees you're assigned to, there's a lift. If you chair a committee, there's this. And then all the travel. So it's quite something to look at how it unravels there. Alternates have a different pay and this and that. So it's just, again, but it's again, to go down that way, I think we would have to add more administration to just keep on top of it. And then what are we doing, right? So that's where I think it just, in the end, sometimes it is better just to keep things simple so that they're relatively straightforward here. So, but again, I'll go like the UBCM best practice guide came up because there was numerous calls out that councils were having a tough time making these decisions. So it was an appeal to the province. And then in some cases, there were some studies done some of our other elected peers took a stab at it and said, okay, well, what formula would they use? And then could your municipality afford it? So if they went on based on what is paid in North Vancouver, is that something that you could afford here? The work is the same. The work and the challenges, whether you're mid-sized, small or large, the workload is all there. I think you just add zeros to it. And in our community, which is growing, as Ms. Gray pointed to, it is busy all the time. And even on vacation, you can end up with someone sitting next to you on the airplane the whole way to Hawaii, for example, and find out they're in another corner of your community and be talking about all sorts of wonderful things. And then you just hope you're not on the same return flight coming home because you just want to get on vacation and your headphones don't work. So there's all sorts of things that happen in this role, but that's why we step up to do it. And so we'll see what happens. It is always good to get diversity and to get people elected. I think the challenge is balancing work and life. I think, we talk a lot about money, but it's a work-life balance and what you're prepared to give up to do the job well. And that's the question we all have to ask ourselves going forward, right? And because it isn't just show up every Monday night, read a few pages of material and show up at a meeting. Like there's so much more to that, to understanding the breadth of the material and the relationships and all the work that goes on and on and on. So anyway, bit of a ramble there, but thank you staff for the report. It has gone through UBCM. It has been to the province and back, and it's a job that we have to do. So we're setting up the next council well. And I think our only advice would be that they take a look at the policy so they understand it, so that in their term, they can then look at, okay, what did we hear? What did we learn? Maybe it is the case of adding in the benefit piece. Maybe it is the case of adding in something more for committee involvement. And that's where that council could make those adjustments based on what they've learned and heard through the whole process. So I just hope that they would do that to set the council up after that for success as well. Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. So we'll call the question. All those in favor, please. And opposed, Councillor McMath is opposed, the motion carries. Okay, the next is 10.2, purpose-based engagement for tree management. Welcome, Ms. Hooper.
Good evening, Your Worship and Council. I'm here tonight to talk about purpose-based engagement for the tree management in Sooke. Staff have been working since December of 2020 to develop a purpose-based engagement strategy. We were waiting for the pandemic to subside before we came back to you with a way to meet in person and truly engage one-on-one with members of the public. That's what we heard the last time staff was in front of council, that we really wanted to get into the same room and have good dialogue. So in front of you today, we're putting forward a purpose-based engagement strategy based on the 4 pillars that we heard of when we were listening to the members of the public based on the survey back in 2020. In the meantime, staff has also made presentations to the Land Use and Environment Committee, or sorry, the Land Use and Development Committee. And we've been working with the public to educate them during Earth Day last week. Councillor Beddows had the opportunity to plant a tree, and we had a lot of information on our website and in person while we were engaging different sectors of the public, not just planting trees, but also at the market on the weekend. So what is purpose-based engagement? It's really about what values are most important to a community, what's in and what's out. Purpose-based engagement also allows us to manage expectations when we're asking questions so that we're making actionable questions as well. Engagement to date has garnered 4 emerging themes. The first one is about investment of resources. What is this community willing to pay? And that reflects what Mr. Saunders said earlier. It's really, what are we wanting to spend on tree management? The second portion was about education, and we want to know the extent of the education and the investment in tree planting, because that was something we also heard loud and clear in the last round of engagement. We also want to know the scope of tree management. Does it apply to just developers, or does it apply to everyone? And then geography. Is tree management for the urban areas, or for the rural areas, or for both? So what's the scope geographically? So moving forward, staff proposes a hybrid model for engagement starting in May and proceeding through July. It'll include one-on-one engagement in the pop-up events like in the markets, in the town center shops, and in parks. And we'd also have the digital experience on Let's Talk at Sooke.ca. We also propose a town hall event similar to what you'll see, I believe, in the OCP engagement process, where we will have presentations throughout the day and have engagement in that town hall type experience. And then we'd also have stakeholder meetings for the development community. We expect that we could also use the citizen budget survey, which is being held from June 15th to July 15th, to help really define what the community is willing to invest in tree management. From there, we'll gather all of the data and bring a report back in the fall on what we heard that after that engagement period is complete, and present it to the council of the day for information, as I said, in the fall for decision making on how to move forward, and perhaps include, depending on what we hear, in the service level review and the budget process. The timeline that I presented above can be done this year. We do have budget existing and a good amount of staff resources available in our work plans, but it also could be deferred to next fall, next spring and summer for the next council's consideration. So in front of you today is the option 1, which is to do it now, or rather option 2, defer it until 2023 engagement. That is the end of my presentation, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. Questions? Councillor St-Pierre.
I just wanted to confirm my understanding of purpose-based, because I have to admit that when I thought of purpose-based with regards to the tree bylaw, I was thinking in terms of what's the purpose of the tree bylaw. And when I see emerging themes, I see investment of resource, education, scope of tree, but these are not about the purpose. So I guess my question is, in terms of the actual engagement, how are we determining purpose? So, I mean, I could think of things like, well, we want to make sure we have canopy for cooling, or we want to beautify, Sooke, or there could be any number of reasons, but how are we actually engaging with the public to determine what purpose a potential tree bylaw is meant to play? And then I have a follow-up question.
Through your worship, I'm not exactly sure how to answer that question other than to bring us back to the 4 pillars that emerged from the first round of engagement. So we want to center our questions based on investment, education, the scope, like who it applies to, and then geography. And from those 4 pillars, sort of develop a decision support tool so that we can ask further, more penetrating questions, I believe, based on those items. We can provide education based on climate action, like you suggest. I'm sorry, I can't answer that
Okay, let me
more
follow.
succinctly.
Just to clarify a little bit, I've heard, for example, from some members of the community, please don't cut down any trees, they're sequestering carbon. But as far as I'm concerned, the number of trees within, for example, the growth area is minuscule compared to, what's outside the growth area. And the amount that's being sequestered automatically outside the growth area is massive compared to anything that would happen with any trees we cut down within. So sequestration for me is not actually a major purpose potentially of a tree bylaw. And therefore, whatever's in it shouldn't be trying to promote sequestration. If we're trying to promote cooling, then that might mean, for example, making sure that trees that are actually helping with cooling, but at the same time not likely to fall on buildings are good to keep. If we're trying to make sure that the canopy remains, then we might be considering trees that are actually resistant to climatic fluctuations, extreme heat and extreme cold, because we know we're going to get that. So I'm curious about whether or not the public's going to have a chance, and we have a chance to put forward possible purposes for tree bylaw and see what the public would actually like to see in terms of the purpose of the tree bylaw, because that'll determine the function of the tree bylaw. Whereas anything else is just going to give us, I don't know what. It's a tree bylaw, but what is it supposed to do? I'll let someone else go and then I'll follow up.
Okay, Councillor McMath.
The previous survey that we did, when asked, does the community want the tree bylaw or not? What was the final result?
Through your worship, I believe it was pretty much split down the middle. The community was essentially a 50-50 split on
Sorry,
wanting
what were
one.
the actual?
I'm sorry, I can report back that to you, but it was very close.
Great, but if we are to follow that survey, opposed was above. So just rewinding back a bit, does the community want a tree bylaw? Like, that's still a question we don't have an answer to. And the answer that we do have is leaning towards no. It's small, but it's like we were presented with earlier, it can split the community if it's not approached correctly. And so there was like a good chunk of change spent on that survey. And then with this engagement piece, I want to make sure that we are using these in the correct way, where it's not, we are going to have a tree bylaw. What are like some things that you want to edit? It's what would you like? What are you looking for? And then cultivate a bylaw or a policy through that. I feel we're a bit cart horse here right now. And I just want to, because you can tell from other processes, people, like when we first discussed a tree bylaw, how many, I should say, trees were cut down in panic. So I just want to make sure that we are sort of formulating this policy, and that, like Councillor St-Pierre said, what are the goals here? What are we looking to accomplish? And then getting it from the grassroots up, rather than giving a presentation and an education piece. I would like the community to educate us, and then we make a policy around that.
Did you have a question, Councillor McMath?
Yeah, I asked at the beginning, and then I
Okay.
talked a lot.
Okay. Councillor Beddows? No, you're good.
I have lots of statements, but I have no questions.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor Bateman.
Yeah, I have a few questions regarding, okay, let's go back. I went back to the committee of the whole agenda from December, late November of 2020, at which we received like 200 pages of feedback along with the draft tree management bylaw number 795. And I think at the time we realized that the public engagement had happened before the bylaw was actually released, and hence there was an immense amount of confusion over what was being proposed. Is that correct?
That's a fair statement, through your worship.
So that's a statement with a question at the end, bang. Okay, so so that's one thing I'm trying to learn here. So we're supposed to finally. Yeah, your tree. I'm curious, when you go back out with this tree management, public engagement, would you be bringing the component parts of that tree bylaw with you to try to educate the public about what you in fact were offering back in 2020?
Through your worship, no, I don't believe we would bring that bylaw back because it's very important to the community that it's not being predetermined. I think we need to, as Councillor Mass suggests, determine what the community wants and what they're willing to, whether it be a policy or a bylaw, or perhaps nothing at all. Perhaps they just want education. So we need to start grassroots and start the process fresh, in my humble opinion.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you mentioned that the land use committee had a discussion about that. Could you just talk a little bit about what was discussed in that meeting?
Absolutely. Through your worship, to Councillor Lajeunesse, we did a presentation, I guess it was during the COVID and we were still online, and staff made a presentation on trees and tree bylaws in other local governments and really the importance of trees, and really tried to focus on education of what's happening both in local government and more globally on the island. And the members of the Land Use and Environment Committee took the chance. The intent was to ask what they wanted from a purpose-based engagement strategy. And really what the answers were is that they wanted some clarity, really reflecting on the pillars of geography and, whether it would apply to all of the community or whether it would just apply to the rural areas, or there'd be separate or special rules for the rural landowners who are trying to manage their forest lands. There was really great engagement based on that information, and they were, if I may, I think they were optimistic about either a policy or a bylaw that could help educate the importance of trees, but without being too prescriptive on that. There was developers who were expressing their challenges. They had particularly covenants on their properties as developers, and they were expressing their dismay that the second they turned their back, the trees were removed. And so there was a lot of conversations about the challenges of bylaws and how important knowing how much enforcement a particular bylaw is going to require on the outset, so that it wasn't just another bylaw that couldn't be enforced. There was some rambling, but does that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks.
Councillor St-Pierre?
I'll follow up with the other questions that I had. So one of the questions actually relates to what Councillor Lajeunesse was asking, because within the Land Use and Development Committee, one of the things that we suggested was that depending on the purpose of whatever comes out of the engagement process, it might be better to have a tree management strategy or policy. And this had to do more with education and, for example, potentially enhancing the canopy, because of course, a tree bylaw doesn't normally do anything except protect trees. It doesn't actually encourage people to put more trees or put the right trees or put the right trees in the right places. So community education was actually one of the things I think that was recommended, along with an actual strategy, potentially with funding and resources from where we could get it to actually increase the number of trees. This was, I think, in favor or favorized over a bylaw with enforcement, with attendant costs and so on and so forth. My question is, would the engagement process actually suggest the different options? Like not just a bylaw, which is prescriptive, but also, or potentially a policy or a strategy, because I think that the community needs to have a chance to look at all of the options in terms of what they would prefer to see and what might be more effective, and where the emphasis should be. Is it on education? Is it more money for more trees? What do you want? What is it they want as far as that stuff goes? So is that part of the process or part of what's expected to happen?
Through your worship, it can be. It's part of the education to talk about the type of tools that are available for a local government. So policy, strategies, and bylaws that can be noted and incorporated. We haven't developed those questions. We wanted to get direction from council first and to move forward.
And my final question is with regards to development permits and someone's putting in a larger development. I think we already have tools in place for dealing with what happens with the trees there, correct?
Through your worship, there are development permit areas that through, say, riparian areas, there's trees are protected. Currently, that's through the development process. Those trees are protected, and it's once the developer leaves the site and those trees, if they're not in a riparian area and they're not in a public right of way or in a park, then they are currently afforded no protection once the development is complete.
Okay, just to further on that, does that still mean that if you were to cut a large number of trees adjacent to another property owner and cause erosion issues, we have no way to protect or deal with that at all?
That is correct, unless it's in a riparian area or
Okay.
in a public park. Yes.
I would like to see within the engagement process this sort of thing mentioned in terms of what could be done and more looking at that.
Councillor Beddows?
Yeah, I have lots of comments, but I'll wait till a motion is passed. But I guess through you, your worship, you're presenting us with two options: one to do it now, and one to do it next year. But you never say maybe not do it at all. So that wasn't proposed, I believe. And so do we still have that option?
Council can move whatever staff recommend or whatever different motion they would like to.
Okay, I have more to say when we get a motion, but I just I would like to have a third option there, but we can have that. And now,
Any other questions? So, yes?
Sure.
Okay,
So I go around through you to either Ms. Hooper or Mr. Powell in terms of our current OCP and the draft OCP. Is it appropriate to ask about those now? So tree protection under, currently there is no tree protection at all in Sooke.
Through your worship, unless it's in a municipal right of
Right,
way
as you
or in a
just said.
park. That's
Thank
correct.
you.
Or in a riparian area, there's no afforded protection.
Right. So, and the current OCP does call for a tree protection bylaw, I believe.
Correct.
Yes, leading questions now. So over to Mr. Paolo in terms of the draft OCP. I think in your development permit guideline exemptions, there is a very clear statement around removals of trees. Is that correct? Could you inform us about that?
Yeah, so under the exemption section, there's a number of listed exemptions which do talk to the different extent of property alteration. So in some instances, we talk about yard work, so existing landscaped areas and things of that nature, whether it's pruning and whatnot. Some exemptions, whether it's for the basis of hazardous trees and the like, those are kind of classed as emergency situations, hazardous situations where it makes sense to have that removal. My understanding with the proposed development permit areas as they stand right now, and in conjunction with a potential future tree management policy bylaw, whatever position is taken in future, those would address both those areas where a development permit is required for those tree removal or protection areas, or in the instances where a development permit is not required, if that policy or bylaw then regulates outside of an application process. So the exemption is to take a look at those areas where it makes sense to have those trees removed, and that somebody would not require application of a development permit.
So I'll just quote you the very paragraph. You will not require a development permit if indeed removal of a tree when there is an imminent danger of the tree falling and causing an injury to persons or property, or when a tree failure has already occurred as a result of a natural cause and presents an immediate hazard. So the people of Sooke are welcome to remove a tree that they deem to be a danger on their property. Is that about right? Okay. And that's in the draft OCP. We've not passed that. Okay. Yeah.
Councillor Beddows?
Yeah, just a quick, Councillor Bateman raised about the draft OCP mentioning a tree law bylaw. I have been approached by numerous people along the same lines as a 30 and 15 meter setback, that they would like that change to a tree policy as opposed to a bylaw, which carries a whole different connotation. But that I wasn't going to bring up until we have our open house. So that could change too. I would not like to use the OCP as a document saying that we're looking for a tree bylaw when it may in fact come out and be a tree policy.
Right, so that's feedback because the OCP is going through its process
That's
that you can take forward.
That's
Because the OCP is a
And
living
a
document.
lot of people are concerned about the tree bylaw and they'd rather see a tree policy. And the tree policy can be any number of different things.
Sure,
The bylaw is very strict.
okay,
So
yes. Councillor McMath?
Shockingly, I'm kind of leaning towards Councillor Beddows' recommendation as a third option.
I don't know what that is because it's not on the floor. So ask a question because we don't have a motion on the floor.
Yeah. I'd like us to have a third option, and maybe Carolyn can help me with the wording, that we defer and let the next council decide if they wish to have a purpose-based tree engagement, rather than us confirming that a purpose-based tree engagement is going to happen.
Okay,
move
so the motion is to do nothing really. So we can't advise, like, then we can't say that the next council should do this. It's up to them. So the motion would be then to just move receipt of this report.
Okay, I move to receive.
Okay.
second that.
So it's basically then that council received the report for information, is moved by Councillor McMath. And that's seconded by Councillor Beddows. Okay, so speaking to the motion, Councillor McMath.
So in a very short amount of time that we have left here as a group, the community has a lot coming down the pipe to process. And as we're just coming out of the pandemic and able to connect in person, where there's so much more meaningful dialogue and pieces and intelligence and information that comes together, I think to have this on top for the community to try to make their personal time available for and to contribute in a meaningful way, I think the OCP is enough for them right now. And the survey that we had done, the majority, although slight, is that it's not warranted at this time. It's not that like the seed, pardon the pun, it has the right intention. It's just to formulate that it will require a lot of engagement and being led by the community. And right now we need that leadership focus on our OCP because there's all these other pieces that are woven in with that. So that's why I moved to receive.
Okay, Councillor Beddows is the seconder.
Yeah, I fully concur with that. A lot of it is, again, what do we have on the plate? We have the OCP, which has been a pretty hot button item, and people will be concentrating on that. And tree bylaw information will come out of that as well. The other thing is we have another open house for the John Phillips proposal, which I'm not allowed to talk about, but is going on. Yeah, I'm not going to raise it. All I'm saying is we had a difficult time to get those venues to do this. And then to throw another one out there in this time frame, I think it would be too much for the community. We live without this long. We can wait another year. And I am the belief that we don't need a tree bylaw. I certainly think we have to have some policy on some trees, which would be more on the development side. But I would just as soon see we deal with this sometime in the future as our community matures. We're not Oak Bay.
Councillor Logan's and St-Pierre.
I'll finally comment during the appropriate time. Last time we had a potential tree management bylaw come forward, there were members of council that thought it would include the cutting of alder trees. If we're thinking that at this level, at this table, we can't move to a level of engagement that was outlined in this report. We need to step way back to the basics to educate the public on what even is tree management. And I think that we're not in a space where we can engage in purpose-based questions, as Councillor St-Pierre eloquently got to the point of we need to engage the public to help determine the purpose instead. I think that will go a really long way in figuring out whether we need more information on, not information, more direction. Should it be a policy or a bylaw? And what exactly are we trying to oversee? In terms of Earth Day and the events, or Earth Week, the events coming up, the upcoming opportunities for public engagement, I think it would be a great opportunity to meet with people and discuss what to look for before cutting down a tree on your property. Is there a squirrel nest? Is there a bird nest? This week, Wild Arc just put out an article in the newspaper. They said that they've had more squirrels from cut trees than earlier in the year than usual. So just what time of year do you look for these things in trees, and how can you also not impact other things during your spring cleaning? And maybe even reiterate not to dump your grass cuttings in our parks, for instance. But I think those would probably be the more appropriate things to engage the public in terms of Earth Week and the upcoming opportunities for engagement. And if any folks do ask about tree management, just to take it way back to the beginning, because if the next council does decide to go forward with a tree management bylaw or policy, I honestly think it will take a long time of engagement, not a short piece, but really coming back to what is a tree and why are we doing this? Thank you.
Councillor St-Pierre?
I find myself agreeing with Councillor McMath and Councillor Beddows on almost every aspect. My one concern when all else is said and done is that whether we had, a 60-40 split or a 51-49 split, we still had a significant number of people in the community that want to see something done about trees. Now, I happen to think that the bylaw itself may not be the right tool at all. That's something to be determined, but that's an opinion that I hold at this point in time, ready to be informed and changed, but nonetheless. Having said that, I feel that we've got a process underway. I also think that the public is likely to be over-engaged. We have the OCP, we have an election, we have a lot of stuff happening all at once, and people do get engagement burnout. I would prefer to see what's been going on. For example, I think some of you that were at the conference, ABICC, saw the great work that was down at North Cowichan Lake, I believe, where they were recovering shoreline. And the way they were doing it was by getting multi-stakeholder property owners together with people who wanted to actually actively work towards planting more native species and so on and so forth. And they were reclaiming shoreline. But basically they were changing the culture by educating the community and putting resources into it. And I think that's the level of engagement that we should be looking at. Not even necessarily an engagement in terms of what are we doing to get a bylaw, but what are we doing to get the kind of tree environment we actually want in our community. And that's about education, changing culture, and putting resources in. So I'm not sure where to go with this, because I don't know that I really want to go with what's been proposed as option number 3, which is simply the table, because that doesn't actually allow us to move forward at all. And
So it's not doing anything, it's just receiving for information.
It's just, I know, but that's not likely to happen. We've got this on the table right now. I would rather look at option number 4, which would be, determining a tree management strategy or policy to enhance the canopy, or to look at what we want to do with that. And that would be using the same resources that Ms. Hooper said are available for an engagement process, but towards something that's actively moving towards improving things, as opposed to determining what we want to do to maybe have a bylaw to maybe improve things or make them worse. So I don't like option 3 because it puts us back to 0 and wastes all our time. And I don't really like option 1 or 2. I would prefer an option 4. I'll vote against that.
That's fair. So Councillor Bateman?
Yeah, so I'll be supporting the option 3 motion on the grounds that A, it's not in our strategic plan for this next 6 months. And I'm disappointed, back in 2020, it was a 4-3 split vote that brought this to this stage of the discussion. And as I said and was confirmed here, there was a great deal of public misunderstanding about that bylaw that Councillor Parkinson made the motion to begin this process back in early 2019, I think it was, or late 2018. A very lively evening. I recall it went late. I was sitting over there. We were all in different places, but it was good. A little bit of back and forth and proof that this council had a variety of opinions and we were representing the community. I found that pretty interesting. So to me, yes, patience and perseverance are the words here. I noted in Colwood, interestingly, they struck a task force in 2017 that spent a good 2.5 years in former Mayor Saunders, as he stated, it's very complicated, these things, and they create a lot of division and concern in the community. However, that task force did persist and they did get a bylaw in place in Colwood. And we're not Oak Bay and neither are we Colwood. I need to say that I was really quite fond of the tree management bylaw that did come forward to us. It was quite a made in Sooke kind of approach. It wasn't a fully restrictive, prescriptive. I guess it was pretty prescriptive, but it wasn't as restrictive as many urban bylaws. It did note that we needed to protect our protected trees. That's any tree with a diameter breast height of 100 centimeters or more. And I don't know how old a tree would be to qualify, but that's a good second growth tree that can continue to grow and become an old growth tree one day. Very clear definitions around sensitive environmental areas, protection in particular of arbutus, Gary oak, Pacific dogwood, and Pacific yew as small saplings, literally, and then the larger trees with a diameter of breast height of 60 centimeters, Douglas fir, grand fir, big leaf maple, western red cedar. One of the key provisions in that bylaw was that no person, quote, no person shall cut or damage any protected tree on a site that requires a development application permit under the district's official community plan. And as clarified earlier, if the tree was a danger, people are welcome to take them down. But until such time as development application permit is issued, that was one of Brenda's big issues, the site of development sites clear cut prior to a permit coming forward. And then in terms of the exemptions within that tree bylaw, it did state this bylaw does not apply to trees outside the community growth area unless they are those protected trees that I cited earlier. And only on lots larger than 1 hectare, 2.5 acres. So the majority of homeowners were unaffected by this bylaw, making it a more of a maiden Sooke. So I could go on. It's been a pretty fascinating process here, but it just shows that we are listening to the community. We recognize it's a complicated matter. And we as a council recognize the next council, there's a wish and a will for this. It was captured again in the OCP public feedback that there is a desire, as Councillor St-Pierre said, for something to be done about the protection of trees in our community. End of sermon.
Thank you. Okay, so some comments from me. I'm stuck on this one, not because I want to move ahead with a bylaw. It's more the ongoing education with the community. Now that things are, opening and we have an opportunity to get out more, we have residents asking questions like, what could they plant that would be fire smart? What would be the appropriate type of trees for us to plant in especially newer areas where there is nothing and residents are looking to get some landscaping in? So getting some direction on what would be helpful as opposed to just buying what's attractive at a nursery. So what grows well, and there are some good Facebook sites that share good information and this and that on what grows well here. But the fire smart is a really big piece. I was out on Earth Week on a field trip, and it was interesting with the children because they planted trees, and the general consensus from the grade 1 class is all the kids have to do the work because the adults chopped all the trees down. So that was their takeaway, that the kids just work, and what work do we have to do on the next field trip? They did enjoy it, but it was very educational for them. And when you receive letters from the schools, from the children, it's always about the trees. Why are you cutting them down? Why aren't you thinking about the habitat? Why aren't you doing this or that? So, you know, and it's a hard question, because then I get asked, why did you allow them to cut down all these trees? Well, you know, we talk about housing and the need to live and all of those sorts of things. So it does lead those conversations. I sort of agree that heading more towards a policy because of sort of a commentary from members of the community are that all the developers do, they come in, they blow up the mountain, they take first they log everything, they blow it up, and then they can't be bothered to even plant a single tree back. And that's their takeaway, leaving it again on the residents to come up with something that fits. So why isn't the council protecting this or that? Why did the tree with the nesting eagles get chopped down? Why is there no provision for shoreline trees to get protected with nesting cormorants or the birds that are about to fly south? Now all of this is on the chopping block. So in the like, what mechanisms do we have? So my struggle with this is to receive for information is then nothing happens. But as we are out engaging with the community, in some ways that engagement piece to share, okay, well, a bylaw wouldn't work because of these reasons. A policy, you could just continue to have those conversations where in this case, it just ends all of that. So that's where it does leave it to just more blasting and bulldozing and not planting anything. And that's as good as we've been able to get this. So I struggle with that. I also struggle when Councillor Parkinson raised this before about, you know, the next days, it was all like, okay, we're firing up our chainsaws, council, because we're going to chop down everything. And then she had shared some pictures and sites, the before and after. And there wasn't even a bylaw being contemplated then, but the habitats were all destroyed, I guess out of a fear or something. And someone, you know, or several went out and chopped everything down. So, and it's their private property, fine. It's ugly to look at. There's no habitat there. So that's where I think it just keeps coming up. Like, when are we actually going to put some tools in place that think about the natural environment? I totally get the need to protect property and to keep your, you know, I had to remove a hazardous tree. It wasn't easy to do. You know, again, wrong tree planted in the wrong location, you know, from not knowing what would make the most sense there. So more education, different choice, all of that going forward. And there's many residents that are in the same position. So I guess my question, Ms. Hooper, although we have a motion on the floor, is just with the OCP unrolling, is there, or maybe this is more appropriate for Mr. Powell or for Mr. McInnes, like, where can our staff fit in to get more info? Well, I guess this just kills it. There is no questions about any of that, even with the OCP conversations going ahead, is there? Because for every resident that doesn't like the tree bylaw, another one wants to see more protection. Like, that's the balance that we're trying to achieve here. And maybe it isn't a bylaw, maybe it is policy, or it's a strategy. But this just ends, my struggle is it just ends all of that conversation. So, you know, and is that after all of this to just be like, okay, well, we're just going to shelve it and next council can pick it up if it's important. So anyway, I'll just leave it at that. I'll go Councillor Logan's and Lajeunesse. The rest of us, we're hitting our time to call the question on this.
I don't see this as killing it. I think that's a mistake to say out loud because people will think that we're just killing it. I don't think that's what this direction is.
But my question though is that it's just to receive for information.
That's this report. So this report's being received at any point at the next council meeting. Councillor St-Pierre could have come up with a magical motion to bring forward as a notice of motion that has a different take on what we should do.
Okay, we can
And-
also do business arising tonight. Okay.
Absolutely. This doesn't kill anything. It just it wraps it up for potentially this term. If someone wants to come up with a different idea between now and the election, please feel free to bring it forward. And if someone wants to bring it forward again next term, they're more than welcome to. There's luckily, Ms. Hooper and her department has done a lot of work on this. And I don't think it's something that people are going to forget about because it is 50-50 in the community. And trees are going to keep coming down and keep reminding people that it needs to be discussed. So these discussions are going to be ongoing for years. But right now, I don't feel it's the time to move ahead with this particular plan and this particular report. I'm happy to move receipt.
Councillor Lajeunesse?
Yeah, I think trees will come down and new trees will grow. I think I'm happy to receive for information and just leave it at that for now. But I think if we wanted to do something useful, education would be good. Teaching people what kinds of trees are suitable in different areas. Trees are there, no two trees are the same. They're very much like we are. They're individuals and they have attitudes. As a former faller myself, I can attest to that. There was a few years ago that there was a kid killed at Camp Bernard because there was a school group that was out on a field trip on a day that it was blowing 80 km. And the news reported that as a freak accident. There was nothing freaky about that. It was 100% predictable. You don't go out and walk in the forest on a windy day. And so I think if we wanted to do anything to do with trees, it would be to educate people on the dangers of trees. And trees have been managed in Sooke over the years. I've been here for almost 60 years and worked as a forest worker, and I'm a third generation forest worker, and I've never met anyone in that industry that didn't love trees. And I think there's a fear from new people coming in from other parts of the country and the world that have this perception that because of our history, there's a fear that we're going to take out all the trees, and that's not the case. I'm not in favor of a tree bylaw of any kind, but I will be happy to move receipt.
Just clarity, it was not at Camp Bernard. It was a Camp Bernard trip, but it wasn't on the site. Okay, so I will call the question. Everyone has spoken twice. So I'm going to call the question. All those in favor, please. Those opposed, Councillor St-Pierre and I are opposed. Motion arising, Councillor St-Pierre.
I'd like to suggest that council direct staff to develop an education and support program for maintaining an urban tree canopy in Sooke, focusing on appropriate species and siting.
Okay, I think you've read it out so fast that our corporate officer wasn't able to catch that. Are you able to? Did you type it?
Yeah, I did.
Can you just email it? No, it's a business arising.
Just give me a sec.
Yeah, and Councillor Bateman seconded it, but we'll just get it forwarded and on the screen.
I had to. All right, it's off. I had to. program should come next, sorry. Nope. No, that's citing with an S. You cite something as a quote, you sit on something and
Okay, the motion is that council direct staff to develop education and support program
un,
and education and support program for maintaining an urban tree canopy in Sooke, focusing on appropriate species and siting. And that's been moved by Councillor St-Pierre and seconded by Councillor Bateman. Speaking to it, go ahead.
This assumes, of course, that staff has the resources to move forward with this sort of thing, and I would actually be hoping for a report from staff before things move forward on what that might look like. But I think this would actually meet many of the needs of the community, allow us to move forward and allow us to keep the conversation alive, potentially allow the community to input in terms of anything further they might want while these programs are ongoing. And this would allow future council to just take it from there and staff to continue interacting with the community on this particular issue.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bateman.
Yeah, I was happy to second that one. Wonderful compromise kind of solution here. You know, we've just launched the Sooke 2030 campaign. This is a classic example of community development as a form of climate action. And yeah, I think that's just wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Beddows, then McMath.
Yeah, my question is to staff. What resources do we have the resources to do a comprehensive plan like this?
Through your worship, I think that's something we can get back to you on with a report to council.
Yeah, because I would certainly like to have that, and that's keeping him. I'm not against this, believe me, but my concern is that we have staff doing a lot of things till the end of the year. And I mean, I don't have a problem with somebody doing that, but again, that might be something that we want to look into sort of next spring. I know other councils feel that if it's here now, but I am very conscious of our what we were setting out to do this year. I'm very conscious of what we have on our plate right now. I'm very conscious that staff is basically up to their eyeballs right now and everything. And so I would like to, both monetarily and staff time, is this feasible to do at this particular point in time, or would it be something best done next year? I'm not saying don't do it. I just don't think this is the time we do it this late in the season. So I don't know how you want to deal with that, but the staff said that they can't really give us an answer right now. So
They would report back if this motion on, and just to confirm that they, you know, if this passes, they would come back with a report and share that with us. Just like they have in here, where there is the existing budget and the resources and so forth that were available to do that this year, as cited in here.
okay.
So there will be more back. Councillor McMath.
Yeah, the same question, but I would just like to hear through your worship from the CAO on that.
Thank you, your worship, to Councillor
that, the costs, a lot of what our member of the public shared, I think are all very valid. I think there's an opportunity as we're out to talk about safety. Maybe watching YouTube and getting a chainsaw is not the best way to maintain or start managing trees on the property if you don't have a skill set in that particular area, because of the dangers associated with such. And also just to be mindful of the woods are not a safe place when it picks up winds, and that's important to do. So I'm in agreement with this and thank the councillors for their time with this. So anything further? I'm going to call the question on the motion. Councillor McMath.
Are we to give guidance in terms of what the scope of this education and support program looks like?
Staff
Because
are going to be coming back with a report as we.
I'm
go.
asking for us as a group, what do we want them to report back on? Like a large program that goes into schools or a small program that pops up at a fair? There's no guidance here. And so like the fiscal piece and the education piece, and also who is selecting like the education points as well? Is that something that we're giving direction on?
So I think that's where we'll get those pieces back in our report. And I was looking for how this item here of what was brought forward sort of fit in with the work plan and with the budget and with the resources that were currently available, as Mr. McKinnon shared. So I would expect something maybe similar, and then we can see what grows from these conversations.
Okay. So then my just final request is for your worship to staff is that we have like a tiered approach and then we make our selection based off what is feasible for us.
Okay, so I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Okay, thank you. There has been a call just for a health break.
Please.
So we will reconvene in about 10 minutes because we still have to travel all the way down to the basement.
Okay.
Do members of the public need to access a water closet? Okay, if you could follow our staff because they need to guide you to a facility.
Or the nearest.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. Are we at 9:10? Oh, we're a little bit early, but I see that council has returned, so we're good to continue on, and hopefully our YouTube viewers don't mind the few minutes of starting, but we're good to go. We're into item 11, which is our bylaw section, property tax rate bylaw. Over to staff.
Thank you, Your Worship. Again, I don't have a formal PowerPoint for this, but just wanted to highlight a few fun facts in regards to the 2022 changes to BC assessment. And before I get into the weeds, just wanted to highlight that I'll be working with Miss Mogg. I think I've been saying her name wrong the whole time. She told me today. It's Miss, no, it's Mogg. It's not Moog. Maybe I have it backwards again, but she told me today. So I'm trying to say it multiple times. Sorry, that was a side conversation. Ms. Mogg, to formalize some infographics and make them user-friendly to include in the property tax inserts, as well as on our website and newsletters, other correspondence that will be coming out over the next weeks and months. So I'm just going to give you the quick verbal update on that, but we will be working over the next few weeks here to formalize the formal infographics that will be going out, and definitely share all that with council. So you guys council will have the information at your fingertips if you get questions from the community. So the quick highlights for me, if council may recall back in when we were formalizing and adopting the budget, that resulted in a $10 million property tax request for 2022. There was an estimate of property tax increase of approximately $100 a month. I'm happy to report that that estimate was a little high. For me, I always like to go high and hopefully come in low. And so the number for this year is $78 for the municipal portion of property taxes. So that works out to $6.50 a month. So value for dollar for the community. I hope the community can appreciate all that they're going to receive for that small contribution of additional taxes. I appreciate any tax increase is never welcome, but the economies of scale that we'll achieve for the $78 of additional taxes, I think will be well received by the community. They're already starting to see infrastructure happening, and they'll see more of that coming up to this year and 2023 and beyond. So on that note, highlight as stated in the report, BC, the assessed value has jumped 36%. For Sooke now, the average residential house is up to $728,377. To further highlight, we will add this in our communications as well. Just because your assessment went up 36% doesn't mean your taxes are going up 36%. So that is definitely some friendly reminders we'll be communicating out to the community just to let them know. And as they can hopefully now see by the actual property tax rate, the actual tax rate actually went down for the community and the overall impact is reduced. So any residential house with taxes higher than that, increased higher than the 36%, will see a different bump than the $78. But for the average property in Sooke, the $78 increase should be what they would see on their property tax bill coming out. Another fun fact would be folios added for the year is 150 folios added to the community of Sooke. I asked Brian Goebel, our GIS wizard, because I have a block always on folios and parcels. So his response to me was, folios are assigned by BC assessment to a property or set of properties. Mostly it's one folio to one parcel, but there are places where folios have multiple properties, i.e., for example, tent lots. So they would have, in theory, multiple parcels, but from my world, it's considered one folio. So that is an increase of 150, and Sooke has been growing. 2018 was 125 folios added, 2019 was 190, 137, and last year was 161, and we are at 150 this year. The last piece I wanted to brief, or two more points to briefly touch on, would be, as council knows, I always highlight the reliance on residential property taxes to fund the overall increase. And I'm happy to report that number slightly going down. For 2020, it was 84.55% of our taxes came from residential properties. In 2022, it's down to 84.19%. So not a huge decrease, but it's going in the right direction in my opinion. Our reliance on property taxes from businesses is increasing from 14.09% to 14.14%. So not huge jumps, but it's definitely moving in the right direction, and more work to come on that in the upcoming years. So for me, that's a positive sign that we're slowly bending the curve on that, and not a massive dollar impact now, but it's coming, and with more work on the community development and the employment land strategy, et cetera, that staff will be working on in the upcoming years will hopefully add to that difference and allow the district to collect a bit more taxes from businesses and commercial, industrial, et cetera. Just a couple more highlights would be we have the rates from CRD, school tax, hospital, MFA, BC Transit. So staff will just kind of consolidate all that information together, because we always, questions always come in from the community. Like you said, $78, my whole bill went up $200. And so we'll just provide that education piece to council, as well as to the staff, the reception staff that deal with these inquiries and in our communications going out. So a couple highlights would be CRD in their estimates. They had said $30 and it's $29.81 is their increase for taxpayers in Sooke. School is up $87. And the other jump, more significant jump, would be BC Transit's up $21.57 for the average property assessed in Sooke. I will leave that there. So the bylaws in front of you for the first 3 readings for council consideration.
Questions, Councillor St-Pierre?
Just a quick clarification on the commercial versus residential. Now, my understanding is that if we went up 150 portfolios on residential, that the commercial must have gone up a little more significantly to be indicated by the micro percentage, simply because of the extraordinary amount of residential growth. Is that the case? Or is my math all messed up?
Actually, I would have to bring a detailed, I don't want to speak out of turn here. I will do some more detailed analysis and bringing that back on the Q1 update, which will be happening to council in May, because we actually lost 2 commercial properties in the overall folio count this year. So staff, these numbers are kind of fresh. So staff will do a bit more work on that and can provide some more detailed information on council on the specifics for those.
Thank you, but it looks like my math is wrong. So I'm gonna take that away.
Any other questions? Councillor McMath?
Can council see the infographics and the material that you're sending out prior to it being sent, rather than just having it for info after?
Yes, through your worship, I don't see a problem with that.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Logans?
Through you to Ms. Gray, could you please go over the school increase again?
The school increase, the rates just came out today. So this is, fresh, just plunking the number into our assessment. The school tax is going up $87.21 for the average, based on the average assessment in Sooke. I don't know specifics on why or what's happened to that. I literally just before the meeting got the email that the rates were out. So we can definitely look into that a bit more and just add that to education as well, once we can flesh out where that's coming from.
Thank you. I think that's something that council we should look at in terms of advocacy for our residents, because I really can't talk today. Advocacy for our residents, because if that is for school district 62, I have a hard time believing a lot of that increase is going to be servicing Sooke.
Yeah, and that's where they're trustees, and they'll probably put out their own communications as well as to what their rationale is there. But yeah, I wonder that the same. Councillor Bateman?
Yeah, I was curious about the Vancouver Island Regional Library increase. I know this BCGEU settlement recently will not impact the 2022 requisition, but do you have a number?
Yes, definitely. I didn't highlight that because it's a smaller number. The library increase is $3.80.
Okay, good.
Councillor McMath?
I would just like to move that council give first, second, and third reading to the property tax rate bylaw number 843, 2022.
Okay, seconded by Councillor Beddows. Any comments, Councillor McMath?
No.
Councillor Beddows? Councillor St-Pierre? Anyone? Anything? Okay, call the question. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Ooh, okay. Good catch. No new business tonight. Correspondence requiring action. There's just one, and it's just a response from Minister Farnsworth, and I just asked that it be on the agenda so it can get broader circulation. It has to do with the enhanced road assessments or the pilot program where seniors can get road testing done within Sooke. Since we've launched this, in some ways, I don't think members of the community are aware that this is offered. So that's where just bringing it here just highlights that this is available. Many of our seniors tend to regulate when they choose to drive. So for many, going into the Mackenzie Testing Center is quite daunting, and having spoken with a few, usually ends up in a failed result because they're driving in an area that they normally would never drive in. And so this was the whole rationale for having something locally cited. Many are just using their vehicle to get groceries during the day, to run errands, get medical appointments and the like, relying on other means to get to the necessary appointments elsewhere and avoiding peak commuting times or evenings. So I think it's still live here. They just continue though to say, you know, and then of course from the pandemic, but at least they haven't canceled it. They're continuing to stay the course. So hopefully as we open up more and folks get back up more, we'll see that change. So we don't lose a service in our community, because I think it's a valuable one to have. So for now, we'll just receive, maybe I'll send them a thank you card. Receive for information by Councillor McMath, seconded by Councillor Bateman. All those in favor, and that's unanimous. Thank you. Council verbal reports, item 14. Councillor Beddows.
Be very pleased to note that I was at a tree planting, and I actually had to assist in planting a tree. So that's one down and 998 to go. Thank you.
But you're not counting, so that's
No.
good. No. Councillor St-Pierre.
I certainly wasn't the only one, but I visited the Earth Day on Saturday at the Sooke Country Market, and it was well attended. Some really good booths. I love the infographic that was put together, the graphic facilitation of the vision that community members have for Sooke. It was really gorgeous, and love seeing that happen. I was also really impressed with the number of additional vendors that we had in the country market. I think we got at least 33 to 50% increase from when I was there previously. I think the new space is treating them well. They seem pretty happy to be there, and they really feel like they're being supported. So that was really nice to see and to hear.
Can't find park.
They couldn't before
Other speakers, other councillors have updates? Councillor Lajeunesse?
Yeah, just the Earth Day celebrations, info sessions were really good. I attended the one online, the webinar on heat pumps. There was a lot of really good information there on the different incentives that are available from the various levels of government, as well as hydro, and it makes it quite affordable actually to switch from oil to a heat pump. The other thing was the Community Act Dev Committee had a fulsome discussion on remote work spaces, and looking at developing a co-working space in Sooke and trying to identify some various locations. Kind of split into two different conversations. One about a space similar to what Langford has done for BC government workers, and which I think would be well utilized here. We might even get people coming from Langford to here because that one's oversubscribed. But the one that I'm more interested in is the private model, like the Club Quench. And if anybody has a chance to go and check that out, I would strongly recommend that you do that because it's really impressive, and it's a space that you can just go and hang out there because it's such a nice space and the way it's done, and so it will attract people. I think they ran it on Fort Street in Victoria for a few years, developed a business case for it, and then the Phillips Brewing owners put a bunch of money into renovate an old warehouse at, I think it's corner of Herald and Store Street. But it's just an amazing space, and it's a place that you would definitely want to go to get out of the house and kind of avoid the cabin fever that comes along with working from home alone. And so that's something that I hope that we can get done here in Sooke sometime in the near future. And that's about it.
Okay, Councillor Bateman.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Lajeunesse. Good to hear that that's moving forward at the end of Earth Week in Sooke, right? So as we've heard, there was tree planting and there was the event at the country market, and I managed to get out for the Whiff and Spit opener, and there's a tree on Whiff and Spit that you can decorate with. Anyway, that's Earth Week is over. I'm not sure you can still do that, but there's a tree on Whiff and Spit. The Christmas tree that we typically decorate as a community, you can now decorate with well wishes for Sooke 2030, which was this campaign that has been developed by Maja Carolsfeld and Christina Mogg, as we'll know her henceforth. And that's good to know. I wish I'd known that months ago. That's okay. And it was a fantastic week of activities. Carol and I forgot to bring our broken toaster to the Electro Recycle stand at the Municipal Hall on Saturday, though they did have a big stack of broken down appliances that are now going to be really formally recycled by and this is, what is the word? The manufacturers initiative to ensure that there is a proper recycling of this material. And the good news is they'll be back in the fall, apparently, possibly in tandem with a Sooke Repair Cafe, the latest of which will happen next Saturday at the community hall, next Saturday morning. But maybe in the fall, there will be one in tandem so that you can take that which you cannot fix straight to the recycling pros. Also on Saturday at the country market, the 606 Water Group was there. They're a working group of OSPRA, the Otter Point Community Association, and they're dedicated to water conservation in that area and in what is known as the 606 Water Aquifer, which stretches from Langford through Machosen, East Sooke, Sooke, i.e. North Sooke, Otter Point, Shirley, Jordan River, and as far as Sombrio Beach. And with water season upon us, water conservation season, I suggested to them that they book a delegation for committee of the whole to educate us on some of these issues. Because there is an issue with that 606 aquifer. And anyway, I can't explain it. So that's why I said, come and educate me at least further and others. I attended the CRD Transportation Committee. And I'll just note, I'll go to the age-friendly committee meeting as the final item. And at that meeting, we had a guest speaker, Maria Weaver, who's the Regional Suicide Prevention Coordinator for the Canadian Mental Health Association in Victoria. And she was telling us about just her work in the community, working with School District 62 and other community groups. Langford and Sooke are the only communities in BC now using the pioneering Mental Health Commission of Canada's Roots of Hope 5-pillar model, which focuses on a number of things, but particularly identifying early as possible kids who are kids, I say, but adults as well, who are slipping into that mindset that would make them contemplate ending their lives. And this work followed the death of a 16-year-old who jumped from the Goldstream trestle in early 2021. So anyway, it was exciting, that's the wrong word. It was educating. Anyway, I was glad to be able to share that the district has completed its service agreement with Sooke Family Resource Society for its youth and adult counseling services. And thanks initially to Councillor McMath, we've put in line item funding for the Need to Suicide Prevention and Education Society. So these being acts of a compassionate community. Okay.
Excellent, thank you.
You asked, I
No,
delivered.
that's good. Just a few highlights. I may have shared this, but I actually served as a juror for the BC Achievement Awards. And so that work is concluded now. And I've been invited to attend the actual ceremony, which will be held in person at Government House in May. So the Lieutenant Governor hosts the awards. That's actually the second time I'll be there. I was at their first one because I served as a juror for the Order of BC. And so the 2 years were done together. So I was there, I think it was in March, actually. I can't quite remember now, but it was their first time actually hosting an event. So that was great. And I got to obviously speak with Her Honor as well as see Premier Horgan there. So that's going back a while, but it was 2 years there. And the most interesting table conversations with this group. It was just amazing. Locally here in Sooke, then I was a juror for the Job's Daughter pageant, which is through the Masons, of which we have the Masons Club here in Sooke. So didn't quite know what to expect at the hotel, but I was greeted with two young gentlemen, probably no more than 9, who met me in the lobby in their suits to escort me down into the hall. And then receive the information. So there was another West Shore RCMP officer there as a juror, as well as 2 other members of sort of the whole, it's not a cohort, but Masons, and generations of women that have served through as pageant queens, I guess, year after year. So 3 young women were contestants, and it came down to 1 who was crowned. It's a scholarship program. A lot of it had to do, and it reminded me, you get questions that some were prepared and others they were not prepared for, but young women doing exceptional work. The winner is studying nursing, and even with the pandemic and all, really wants to devote herself to caring for others and to pursue a career in nursing. So she will be traveling throughout the province, and then at the end will receive money to help her continue on with her post-secondary education. So fascinating experience, again, in person at the Prestige Hotel here in Sooke. And a lot of, I would say, girl power, like generations of women coming together and supporting women. So it was really quite something. And then a younger generation coming forward as well, and all women helping women and guiding each other. It was very empowering. I was out with the field trip, as I mentioned, for Sooke Elementary, and it was actually a lot of fun walking with the classes. Different school groups had come and gone out of the Pine Park Place to plant trees, and others were heading elsewhere. So we crossed paths with the Colpoye, with Journey Middle School, and all different students going in different directions to do wonderful things and to learn within our community. So I thought that was wonderful. There were oyster shells that they colored. So they were given oyster shells. They were broken out into story time. So Sooke Literacy was there to share a story and to do a craft that would then be hung on the tree. And then while others were planting, and then they switched. So a lot of education on the types of trees and really excellent information. So well done, staff, as well as the others that were there for this. And it was fun to cross paths with different people as we were out and about. I was at the Chamber Mixer. Councillor Lajeunesse was there. That was just before Good Friday. So they've started up their mixer events as well as their Newcomers Club again. And Rotary Club was Zooming with them last week or the week before. I can't remember now. It was last week. And so it's always great to meet up with Rotary and to give, usually it's more in person. So I didn't want to be just a talking head in a box. I had a PowerPoint prepared the last time, but this time I was a talking head in a Zoom box. So hopefully it was somewhat informative. The vaccination clinic that was serving our young people is closed at Sea Park, so that's wound up. So any parents still needing to get the second dose will need to go elsewhere for that, but appreciate Sea Park and the commission led by Councillor Beddows for providing that local opportunity in our home. The local government working group on rodenticides is also wrapping up their policy paper, so that'll be making its way forward. As well as the intersectoral dialogue for the family justice reform that's chaired by Chief Justice Robert Bauman, that I've been a party or I can't talk now either, participating on for several months now, is also wrapping up with their final position. And basically, in a nutshell, family justice is not working as it is right now. 100 years or so ago, as it started to come forward, it was basically crammed into the criminal court system. And then that's leading to impacts mainly on children. And there's a lot of excellent research as to why that's not working. And it's likely because it was kind of humbling, though it made me angry. At one time, women and children were viewed as property. So that's why it was put into this particular court system, and it's never changed 100 years later. So it's timely now for this reform. And that's certainly what's taking place, broad group of representation, and also recognizing how the impact is really hit Indigenous communities, women and children particularly hard, with devastating results. And so that's why there's just a real move for change, and it's wonderful. The Chief Justice is very inspiring. He may not view himself that way as a judge, but he certainly is. He's just so matter of fact and recognizing that there's a problem and pulling it all together. So those are some things that have been happening, and just appreciate Councillor Logan's for Deputy Mayor responding to emails and chairing a couple of meetings. Councillor Lajeunesse is up next. May 1st is coming up rapidly. April concludes this week, so May 1st you'll be up next. So I'll be in touch with you should I have any planned absences. I do have to actually take some time off, but I don't know, it keeps filling up with other things. So anyway, maybe I just need to take Councillor Beddows' advice and just physically leave the community. But my life is tied into my phone. What would I do without it? So it goes. So yeah, that's kind of a wrap there, but a lot of things happening and more unfolding, as you see, not just with what the district is doing, but with other community organizations. We know the Fine Arts Show is planning to resume in person at Sea Park, which is excellent. Hearing some news about the Philharmonic, different choir groups as well. And this is what's leading to our lack of venue space. It goes back to the 2014 referendum, growing community needing more space to have these amazing, excellent events. And then all this growth, no new spaces, and now everyone's competing for the same spaces. I also see the Wizard of Oz is returning. I don't have a part in that this time, but I did the last time. I actually sang in it. Maybe I was the mayor of Munchkin City, of course. Still know the words, but maybe after that, they've probably chosen someone that can sing. So thank you, Councillor St-Pierre.
Sorry, I just happened to forget a couple of things. One of them is that I attended the webinar on DRIPA, the Declaration of Aboriginal Rights, Guidance for Local Government Confirmation. And I found it was interesting, but also there was cause for celebration in Sooke, because a lot of what they were saying really boiled down to maintain lines of communication, see if you can collaborate, look at what you can do with and how you can support. And we're not always doing everything, but it looks like we're definitely moving in that direction with what we've been up to. And that was good. The other thing that I forgot to mention and failed to mention was that I had a meeting of the Land Use Committee. And one of the things we did do was a report back on impressions and so on and so forth. And the committee's had a good experience. And I think the staff reflected, comments from the staff reflected that. But also there was a really lively discussion, very lively discussion on John Phillips Memorial and the engagement process. And I'm sure that'll be coming forward soon. Some interesting things came out of that.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. Oh, Councillor McMath, I missed that.
Today I went to Grouse Nest and visited, they, not originally their plans, but is now segued into becoming a Ukrainian refugee establishment. And it's incredible, the work that they've done. And it was very humbling and a very large gratitude check to see on painter's tape put on the door who will be occupying the rooms. And one whew, is like a single mother. Whew, sorry. It was so special to see, and all the pieces and how the community and different groups and different sectors have just come together, and the work, materials, the necessary items down to toothbrushes that have been donated, all these pieces that have been given. So one of the questions I had today was, what can the district of Sooke do? And so it's funny because everything ties together. And so they're talking with BC Transit. One of the components that they struggle with is transportation for people coming to that place. So they've been speaking with BC Transit, and Sooke has a right of way near their driveway, which they need to thin the trees. It's all woven together to create sight lines so a transit bus can pull out safely. So one of the pieces that's going to be coming forward to us for help is the district taking care of, because that's our sector, to help so that they can have that infrastructure put in. Thin, I believe was the words used.
Yeah, there is the one community bus that travels through there. The route's changing somewhat. I don't fully remember how the route's changing, but it is there. So it at least can pick folks up and take them to Highway 14. It'll be the Gillespie.
Yeah,
I
so
think is
they're
where the
making an
changes.
additional, they're proposing they would make an additional stop at the end of the driveway at Grossness. And for that to be successful, they need assistance from us. Exactly. Yeah.
And transit also has a program that in place to support refugees with bus pass. So that's already in transit already has that in place. So anyway, okay. Thank you, Ms. Councillor McMath, for attending. Okay, so I'll call for a motion to adjourn, please. Moved by Councillor McMath, seconded by Councillor Lajeunesse. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you.